Good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is the Tactical Operations Center webinar series on quality assurance and situational awareness. And this is the third and final webinar in our series on civil military operations solutions for tactical operations centers. My name is Matt Funk, and I've been a product engineer with Esri for about 19 years now. And with me today is my co-presenter, Chief Larry Strasser, from the U.S. Army. Larry?
Hello, everybody. CW2, Larry Strasser, an active duty geospatial engineer with 6 combat deployments and 19 years of service. Currently, I'm here as a training with industry student at Esri, a program designed to inform and integrate new technologies into the Army and share my current operational experience with the company here.
So today we're going to talk about the need to use information and turn that into knowledge, and then use that knowledge in making decisions about operations. So if you've attended our previous webinars on operations centers, you've seen our overview of our team's work to build supporting tools for civil military operations, specifically for civil affairs units. And also our work done to collect survey information and civil information from the field. So just to kind of review, an operations center is, you can think of this as an actual physical location where operations are being monitored and planned. So think of it as there are analysts who are watching existing current operations unfold in the field, and at the same time they're also viewing feedback from previous operations and after action reviews. And they're also at the same time planning future operations. So all of these workflows are basically being done concurrently and overlapping, and the pace is usually pretty fast. Specifically for civil military operations centers and the civil affairs teams that staff them, their job is to plan missions to interact with and work with local populations to gather information and understand the people that live there and their social and political environment. The civil affairs operations are based on going out to the population and talking with people in a certain area. And as we learned in our last webinar on smart forms, as they're doing this, they're collecting survey information. This information is then shared with the command staff, who use it to plan future missions, share information with key stakeholders and possibly with a local population, and also make recommendations or advisements. For our Civil Military Operations Center, this sharing of information is usually done with an operations dashboard.
Thanks, Matt. So the primary purpose of the civil military operations solution is to get near real-time, accurate information to a decision maker. We do this through the operations dashboard. So as we can see, we have a legend. We have a detailed information for additional information that the decision maker may require. We also have a extra component inside the operations dashboard to provide statistical analysis of the surveys that have been collected. In the strongest country partner, we have this other option. In the other option, if we go through our surveys through the QA/QC process and we see similarities, we can change our form for future date to reflect those additional options. Down here in the priority issues, down on the bottom, there is a null option. A null option is an unknown blank entity, and which provides no useful information to a decision maker. So we can go with 2 options of either one, sending it back to the survey team to get this information filled out, or we can reject it and remove it from the graphs. And I will pass this back to Matt for an in-depth study of QA/QC.
Okay, thanks, Larry. So Larry pointed out one of the main problems that we have with gathering information in the field and sharing it directly with those decision makers and the people who are trying to understand how things work in an area. The problem we have is that the quality of the information collected and shared affects the quality of the decisions and the understanding that is used based on this information. There's a direct downstream effect of the usefulness of information. Bad information can lead to misinformed decisions. And this is kind of the theme that we want to talk about, is that the understanding of an area and the decisions made on that are only as good as the information we can provide them. So in thinking about the types of information that we're collecting as part of civil military operations, this is basically stuff that's collected in the field, survey information that's collected based on our atmospherics questionnaire, our population reports, and requests for information that were discussed in our last webinar on smarter forms. And the problems that we encounter in this survey information might include missing responses, where the person doing the interview misinterpreted something, or the interviewee just refused to answer the question. There may be questionable responses, where the interviewer misunderstood or typed something in wrong, or the person being interviewed just didn't understand. There's also spelling and grammar errors, which they can be annoying, but they can also miscue information and miscategorize data, which makes it difficult to understand what we're trying to represent. And of course, there's null values. In any of these cases, the errors affect how the survey responses are reported. So it's important to be able to try and reduce their effect, to basically mitigate the problems as best as we can. For example, one way we can do that to help reduce the errors is by choosing our questions very carefully. For example, if I want to know which country is the strongest security partner of your country, and I leave that as just a simple text box, there are many ways that we can type in the same thing. For example, I can type in Great Britain, United Kingdom, England, or use the three-letter denominator GBR. And they all may mean the same thing, but they can be categorized as 4 different separate responses. What I can do instead is, instead of giving them an open text box, I can actually give a pick list and make them choose from one of those options in the list. This makes it a lot easier to make sure I'm getting the information that I want in a format that I can really use. And that is one of the goals of the civil military operations solution, is to give the correct information, or give the best tools possible for people conducting these civil affairs missions, and try and reduce the amount of errors that they can propagate through the workflow. So to just kind of review the solution itself, the civil military operations solution is a set of tools and applications that were based on existing civil affairs workflows. So we aren't trying to change the workflows, we're basically trying to give them a sets of tools that make them a little more efficient and integrate their processes. So initially, a lot of the collection of information was done on paper or in Word documents, and what we've done is given them a set of tools to do the field collection on handheld devices or laptops, but also be able to kind of plan those operations and manage the data that comes in from the field collection. And also, as Larry's shown, to be able to monitor those operations and monitor the field collection and also brief that information. So the tools that we've built, the applications we built, were based on field collection using Survey 1, 2, 3 applications, management applications built on AppBuilder for the planning of those missions and managing the data, and as Larry shown, being able to show and brief that information with an operations dashboard. Now, the quality assurance of this information is built in and part of the process. And again, this isn't really necessarily something that's new to these civil affairs workflows, but it was definitely something we had to think about and make sure that we were managing as part of building these applications. So from the very beginning, the quality assurance starts at the very start, before any data is collected. We started that with the designing of the forms that were going to be used to collect this survey information, and thinking about the person that is going to be using them, the environment and the situation that they're going to be using the application in. Once we've designed those forms and published those to an ArcGIS online organization, the end user can then log in and download that to their device, which could be a tablet, it could be a smart device, it could be a laptop. With that information, with that in hand, they can take that in the field and start collecting data. But we don't want to just automatically represent that data to our stakeholders. Now, we want to have a person back in the office actually reviewing that information. So this is kind of one of those quality checkpoints that is essential to making sure that we're giving the best information possible. And this is done with our Civil Military Operations Manager application, which is used to kind of verify or reject the information that's coming in from the field. Once we're sure we've got our good information, we can then share that through our Civil Military Operations dashboard. And again, in this case, we're making sure that we are filtering that data and making sure that we're only looking at the stuff that has been verified. Of course, this is a cyclical process, and as we learn, as we start collecting data, we also have to think about the next generation of forms. So feedback is very important to redesigning the next generation of those forms. Next, let's actually take a look at these applications and kind of how we developed them. So again, we're looking at the forms that were created for field collection using Survey 123. The manager application that was used to manage the data and review it with Web AppBuilder, and of course presenting and monitoring with the operations dashboard. And the pattern to develop these is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. From the very beginning, we start with survey data, so creating those survey forms. And this is done in either Survey 123 online as part of ArcGIS.com, or on the local version of that, which is Survey 123 Connect, which is running on your local device. So we develop those forms in those applications, and then we publish those to an ArcGIS online organization. And this is how the end users will share and work with these applications through this organization. So for our survey forms, once they're shared to the organization, the end user can download them to their device and take those into the field and start collecting information. For our web application, the pattern is very similar. So again, we start with some of the services that were created as part of publishing the forms. So we use those services, we put those into a web map. The web map is basically there to configure the symbology, describe the field visibility for the questions that we want to work with, and any other properties that are associated with those layers. So think of the web map as kind of a collection point for the services we want to use. We then use those web maps in the applications to configure the way we want the end user to interact with them. For Web AppBuilder, that means we're using that web map to collect those data sets, as well as configuring our widgets, which allow us to interact with that data. For our manager app, that's going to be our filter widget and our smart editor widget. So that application is then published, and our data manager can use that to then QA/QC the results that are coming in from our field surveys. Similar pattern for our operations dashboard. After we've got our web map configured, we use that in operations dashboard to configure our different display and visualization widgets. That application is then published and used as the briefing and monitoring application in our watch center. So let's actually go through the demonstrations and kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. We'll start off with the very first part, and that is our survey applications. So what we're looking at here is, on the left-hand side, is our Survey 123 Connect for ArcGIS. And we're showing the atmospherics questionnaire, which is one of the forms that are provided as part of the Civil Military Operations solution. This form is built in conjunction with Microsoft Excel, which is on the right-hand side. So as I build my form in the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet and save that, the resulting form is displayed on my left-hand side. Now again, I'm not going to go through the actual construction of these forms. That was covered very well by Eric in our previous webinar on smart forms. But I'd like to point out a few of the patterns that we used in trying to make sure that we get the best information possible and make it easier for the person collecting the information. So some of the things that we did were, first off, providing default values. That's a really easy way to make sure the end user isn't inadvertently adding wrong information. For example, the date and time is a very simple one. So when the form is launched from the Survey123 application, we automatically populate it with the current date and time. So the end user doesn't have to search around and figure out what time it is, what's the date, and start adding this in. We want to make sure that the end user who's collecting this information in the field is concentrating more on the interview and process rather than the application. Another thing we can do to help them is to add hints to our question. So for example, what town do you live in? That's the actual question, but below I'm telling the user I want to make sure that they include the city or town and the state or province that is where the survey or the interviewee is living. And we look at the form, we can kind of see that here's my actual question, and on the right-hand side, I can add that hint. So this is just a way to kind of cue that end user into what type of information I'm expecting. Another one of the little things that help us make sure we're getting the best information is, as I mentioned in my slide deck, instead of using text boxes to start responding to fill in the answers for every single question, start using pick lists. For example, age range. In this case, I want to know just the age range, and I give them a few different options. They can only select one of these. I don't have to expect them to type in a number or say type in a few words or something and try and understand what they were trying to mean by that. I basically have given them and reduced the amount of stuff that they can select. Now that helps a little bit, but occasionally we have questions that kind of go beyond that list. So I have the option to give them a pick list, but if you can see my hint here, I have an option in here to allow them to type in another response. So for example, for my most reliable source of information, if the interviewee's response isn't among my list, I can have them select other and type in something that makes a little more, that whatever they responded with. So this is something that actually we came across in prototyping and drafting a lot of these forms. In working with this question specifically, when we initially did our first draft, we had newspaper, radio, social media. But later on, we found that a lot of people were picking the other option and typing in internet, which ended up being one of our default values. And the next time we went to develop it and actually publish the final version of this form. So that's 3 options. There's also another option that actually doesn't even show up on the form, and that's the use of hidden fields. This is something that's going to show up in Larry's demonstration of working with data. So what I've got is a field that is basically the state of this survey. It's called status. So when I submit this form, I have the status automatically set to a default value of received, meaning that this form's just been submitted. I really don't want my end user playing with that. I don't want them to try and force their way around that to validate or reject that information. So I make sure that's a hidden field which doesn't even show up in my form. And this is important in making sure that the best data I have is passed on to our end user. So in the overall workflow, I've created my form at this point, and the next step is to have someone review that information once it's been surveyed out in the field and published to our online forums. So next, Larry's going to show you the Civil Military Operations Manager application and how that is used to validate and verify these responses and how that status field plays into that.
Thanks, Matt. So looking at our operations dashboard, we see our other column, and then we see this null value. How did this null value get here? Well, the way that it got here is in our form, it was not a required attribute, so it could be submitted. So the entity left the information blank. So we need to correct this issue. So we do that through the Military Operations Manager. Military Operations Manager is web-based, so it doesn't require any additional GIS software or any GIS experience to conduct the QA/QC process. We have widgets installed like Smart Editor to do the editing, printing if necessary. We can change the base map for extra clarity. We can add filters to filter out the information for the QA/QC process, the layers, and the legend. So in our filter list, we have 3 different filters: received, verified, and rejected. So we're going to click on the received option to see what surveys have been submitted since the last time we conducted the QRQC process. And we see that we've had 5 reports. We can click on one of the entities and check the information to see if it's valid. And utilizing the Smart Editor widget, we can easily change the values from received to verified to show that the information has been QA/QC. Do that to this one as well, and we see that that is one of our null values, that the information was not submitted. So we'll also go into the Smart Editor and change it to rejected and click Save. And we'll look at this one, and it was our other null value. So we can go back into the Smart Editor and change that to rejected and click Save. So now we need to see our QA/QC process in the operations dashboard. But as you can see, the null is still there. So what we need to do is apply filters based on that status to only show the information that has been QA/QC'd. The primary way of doing that, so it's done in the background, is through the original web map that feeds the operation dashboard. And so we can add a filter layer in the web map based on the status and only verified, and apply the filter, and we see the 2 rejected entities disappear. We save our web map and refresh our operations dashboard. And as you can see, the detailed information has been changed. The null values have gone away, and the priority issue is a cleaner graph for easy decision making. And the rejected reports have been removed from the map for the decision maker. Another method of filtering out the information is within the operations dashboard for desktop. And we can apply these filters via a filter that we've created inside the web map for verified, and update it inside of each individual widget. Or we can also do an additional filter inside the web map using the layer filters, and we'll add one more, and we will call that one rejected, based on our status attribute, and rejected, and okay that, and close that. So now over here in our filters, it gives us the options to view all different types. So it provides an additional option for situational awareness for a decision maker. So we can use the all features filter to show where the surveys have been disseminated and where we need to have better emphasis. We can only see what we need to for the decision maker to know what resources and efforts that he needs to apply. And then also he can go in and look at the rejected ones to see which teams have been having issues and see what assistance that he can possibly require. This is a main component to provide a decision maker the two main things that he needs from the information, and that is the so what and what I can do about it. And now I will pass it back to Matt for the conclusion.
So the goal of our workshop today, our webinar today, was to try and explain how we tied the quality of the data that's being collected and the decisions and understanding that is made for operations, for civil affairs. Basically, we want to make sure that the best information gets to the people who need it. And we do that first by making sure we design forms that are as close to error-proof as possible. Not really that we're going to solve all of the errors, but make sure that we are mitigating that as best as we can. And we want to do that with that end user in mind, the person who's going out collecting that information in the field. We also want to make sure that there's an interrupt in that flow of information and make sure that there's someone who's actually able to review that information and validate the quality of that data that's being brought in from the field. And that's done through that manager application. And the third step is to make sure that when we're presenting and briefing and monitoring that we're able to filter the data that comes in. So these three together help us make sure that we are doing the best we can to make sure that the best information is getting to those people who need it. Now, the civil military operations solution is just one of many of the solutions that our teams produce. And these solutions are basically ready to use applications, maps, and tools that are based on very specific, well-known workflows for industry users. All of these solutions are documented, meaning that they come with both online and offline documentation for people who are have access to the internet, or if you are using it on a disconnected laptop. All of these solutions are also supported and maintained, meaning if you've got a problem or something's not working right, you can call up our tech support, or if you have questions or comments about it, you can contact us on our GeoNet forums. They're also open source, meaning that you can download the solutions and use them as kind of a starting point for your own workflows and modify them and reuse them or integrate them into other processes as you see fit. So this kind of wraps up the webinar for today. So I think we're ready for a few questions here. Laura, do we have something? Do we have questions going on?
Yeah, we've had quite a few questions coming through. I've been doing my best to answer them while we've been going along. So if you haven't asked your question already, go ahead and use the questions function on your right. In the meantime, we do have a couple here that we want to get answered. So Matt, we have a question asking, can Survey 123 do spell checking?
Can Survey 123 do spell checking? That's a great question. Actually, I don't think it can do spell checking right now. Right now, I think it is, let's see, version 2.2. That's a great question. I'm going to have to go and research that and get back to you. But right now, I'm pretty sure it does not.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then we had this question come through about operation security. They want to know how it's maintained once the data is collected. So kind of going over the sharing settings in Survey 123.
Okay, so basically when the forms are created and published, they're published to a specific online organization or to a portal for ArcGIS. And the only way you can really get access to the services that run that form is to be a member of that organization and have access to the group that that information is shared through. This is actually one of the features of ArcGIS Online and Portal for ArcGIS, in that the access to that information, those services, is controlled through the use of groups. So if you're not a member of the group, you don't have access to that service.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that for the audience. We also have a question saying, do you need Microsoft Excel to build the Survey 123 forms?
That's a good one. Yes, I use the desktop version of Survey 123 Connect, which uses Microsoft Excel. However, the Survey 123 online version does not, and you can build the same forms using ArcGIS Survey 123 online in the same fashion, but without using Microsoft Excel.
Great, thank you. We have another question. Are the widgets used included in the solution, or are they separate?
Okay. So like the widgets that were part of the manager application, I'm assuming, yeah, those are actually included as part of Web App Builder. So in building these applications, what we did was tried to use all of the built-in widgets that were available. So literally all we've really done as part of this solution for Web App Builder is configure the existing applications.
Okay, and we have another one. Are there doctrinal standards for implementation?
Okay, so the standards for implementing these, we actually worked with some specific groups who were following their own workflows. So I can't say that there is a doctrine that's being followed that we know of. Literally, we were trying to just sit down and understand the processes that were being used by these civil affairs groups who are conducting these civil and military operations. So I don't know if there's an actual standard or a field manual or a TTP that's being followed, but these are the processes that were actually being used in the field. And that was our goal, to make sure that we're not just trying to make additional work or trying to enforce our own processes, but make sure that we can augment existing workflows.
Okay, and then we have another question. How do we set all of this up in an on-premise enterprise portal instance without using the desktop applications?
Okay, so we didn't really use any desktop applications to go through this process. The Web App Builder is, again, just a configuration of a web application that was built online. The survey forms can be built in Survey 123 online, and of course, the operations dashboard again is a ArcGIS server, an online application. So there really wasn't much that we've talked about today that was built using any of the desktop applications. For the survey forms, it just happened to be that's what I was using to demonstrate the Survey 123 how those forms were built using the Survey 123 Connect. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, if you'd like us to go into that further, please write a message in the questions box. But for now, we're going to move on to the next question. To assist in designing field collections for different scenarios, does any form of working group for best practice currently exist?
That's a good question, and I do not know. That would be a great question to post to the GeoNet forums and ask about other groups that have used this solution or are working in the same arena. The solution we've got was published probably about 2 or 3 months ago, so it's still relatively new, and we're still getting a lot of feedback that we're going to incorporate into our next round of information. So I'm not sure about if anybody has tried that, but that is definitely a good question to ask and post on our forums.
Yes, and anyone who hasn't been on GeoNet, we highly encourage you to go and ask questions and collaborate with people online. So then we have another question here, and it says, so Chris here says, I missed something. Did the filtering of the dashboard data come from the graphs or the services?
I'll answer this one, Matt. The information for the graphs came from the web map. So the web map drives the operations dashboard, which drives the graphs. So all the information inside of the web map is driving the operations dashboard to produce the information and edit the graphs.
Okay, great. And then Matt, I need ArcMap for any of these applications?
No, that while that's our desktop application, yeah, a lot of the stuff that we did here today again was just based on online development patterns. So there's no desktop required. It was the goal in mind was, or the people that we had in mind for working with this were not GIS users. They weren't necessarily knowing that they were working with a GIS system. So we wanted to keep it light. We wanted to make sure it was online and accessible from a browser or handheld device. So no desktop applications were part of this, and not ArcMap, nor ArcGIS Pro.
Okay, great. And we had another question come through during the webinar that we might want to answer for the audience. And it was in regards to setting limits without using a pick list. So for example, in the case of zip codes, I know that we can derive zip codes from the geolocation selected on the map, but do you want to go into that a little further, Matt?
Good question. That one I'm not, I don't know if there is a range of values to put in there. I'd go look at the field. Let's see our survey forms and see what the help topics would say about that. So in our Excel form that comes with that, that is developed as part of Survey 123 Connect, there's options for the different types of fields we can use. Pick lists are usually lists, but I'm looking for something in a range of values. I may not find something right here, but this is probably where I'm thinking about where this might go. So there's probably a range value in here that I could use to kind of set the upper limit and a lower limit to show in the pick list or a spinner value. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing it right here, but that's kind of where I'm thinking about what that would look like.
Okay, perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, actually, I have one more that just popped up. It says, will you be making this video available? I can go ahead and answer that. Yes, we are recording today's session along with the Q&A here at the end. So we'll be posting that early next week on the main series page. So you should have gotten an email. That was how you registered for this webinar, and you'll be able to access the recording from that page. If you have any additional questions or any issues, you may feel free to reach out to me at any time, Krenek, K-R-E-N-E-K, @esri.com. And with that, I think we're pretty much done. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate you answering those questions. And Larry, those were great demos. So we'll see you at our next webinar once we release another series.